Davy Crockett, read by Nicholas Cage, written by James Kunstler, with original music by David Bromberg. Find more stories at www.rabbitears.com.
My name is Davy Crockett, and I am a legend of American history. The original ring-tailed roarer of the western woods, I called myself. The yellow blossom of the gum swamp. Woo-hee, I was a beauty. Of course, I was a flesh and blood person, born and lived and loved my wife and babies, and now passed into the celestial vapors from where I speak. Young folks ought to know their history and how a person gets to be a legend. So these here are the naked, green-skinned facts of my life. And a lot of it is the truth, too. I was born when this land was young, on a river called the Nolichucky in a wild part of the republic called Tennessee, before they even made it a state. How wild was it? Well, it was so full of bears that they set up a bear legislature, and you couldn't chop down a tree without bears a-climbing the stump to give a speech. It was so wild that the only human folks they let in was Crockett's, because a Crockett can grin any wild varmint out of countenance. Now, one autumn in my 9th year of life, game had got scarce around the home place, so we set off a-hunting over Big Sandy Way. Pa had left me in my own charge. Well, wouldn't you know, but down in a slough I chanced upon a hollow log, and from the inside there come a queer kind of humming, like my ma and sisters sound like at a quarter mile on wash day. I did peer in the log, and there beheld a wondrous sight. Beautiful honeycombs dripping with golden sweetness. That crispy cold fall air had lulled the bees into a snooze. I leaned my rifle against the side of the log and squeezed right in. The bees just rolled over in their little bee beds and kept on a-humming whilst I partook of a honey feast. By and by, I felt something a-poking my posterities, like the cold snout of a dog. "Get back now, old thunder," said I, a-thinking it was Pa's best hound. But all I heard was a low growl. Grrr! And then more poking from behind until my face was most shoved up into that sticky old mess of honeycomb. By the great horn spoon, I said to myself, understanding all at a sudden that I was between a bear and his noonday meal. Meantime, snug as we all were, it was warming up in that old hollow log. And those bees had about woke from their slumber. Said the bees. Now, in such a fix, I had to ask myself which I preferred, a face full of bees or a face full of bear. And finally I reckoned that I might find fairer use for my face on the bear end of things, and vice versa my posteriors at the bee end. So I squoonched about and squoze around until I was a-staring that lumberin' varmint snout to snout. "Why, how do you do, stranger?" said I, hoping to establish respectful terms right off. "Ain't it a fine day, though?" "Grrr," said the bear. "Why, you are right about that," said I, "and there is nothing on this universal earth that beats a honey lunch. I can avouch it, for I have just ate me one here in this very log, and there is plenty left. Let others have their blood-soaked viands, their possum innards, their livers and gizzards. Give me sweet, fresh honey every time." "Grrr," said the bear. Well, by now, those bees had warmed themselves to full alertness. And noticing how I'd chawed a pretty portion of their honeycomb, they'd begun to abuse my posteriors with their stingers. It was all I could do not to holler and moan. But I just put on my finest $2 grin and said to the bear, "If you let me crawl out of this here hollow log, kind stranger, you will find a clear path to the fattest honeycombs this side of Sunday." "Bzz, bzz," said the bees. "But if you decide to chaw my head off instead, why then my frozen carcass will plug up the log and you'll have to wait until spring to have your treat." Said the bear. Apparently he was studying the matter. All the while, those bees had used my straggling hams for target practice, and it felt like my pants was peppered with bird shot. "Well, make up your gosh darn mind, stranger," I cussed that bear. "Chaw my head off or let me pass." Wouldn't you know, he slud out, and I crawled none too gingerly to the opening, my hindermost quarters nearly aflame with bee stings. "Stand fast now," I told that bear. I guess his civility had found itself at last, for he'd done as I asked, and was all smiles about it too. But no sooner did I pop my swollen posteriors from that hollow gum log, like a cork from a jug, than the swarm of bees busted out. Angry is not the word to describe their frame of mind. They was out for scalps. And seeing that hulking figure of a bear, they'd once beset the poor critter like a thunderstorm a-swarming over the peak of Old Baldy, and both bear and bees lit out of the slough like lightning. I never did see that particular bear again, though I knew many more like him. Well, by and by I growed up and married pretty Polly Finley, and together we had a mess of daughters. But the hunting grew scarcer, and so we removed to the Elk River country further west. They called it the Shakes, because the earthquake of 1811 struck hard there. One fine afternoon at the place called Tim's Ford, I come across an old tom possum peacefully sunning himself amidst a glade of prickly ash. I clapped the breech of Brown Betsy directly to my shoulder, and would have sent a charge of lead a-whistling his way, but he lifted up a paw and stopped me from firing. "Is your name Crockett?" he asked. "Why, burn my britches if I am not Davy Crockett to the very bone," said I. "Then you needn't take no further trouble, for I consider myself as good as shot," the possum said, and at once he waddled out of the prickly ash, declaring, "Show me your skillet, and I shall jump right in it." I stooped down to pat the little varmint's noggin. "May I be skinned myself before I harm a hair on your head," said I, "for I never had such a compliment in all my days. Get along now and live a good, clean possum life." off he waddled with my blessing. Well, it was long about that same year when General Andy Jackson recruited us to fight the Red Sticks down Alabama way after they burnt down Fort Mims. I went, and Old Hickory, as they called Jackson, made me a colonel. But I seen much that disgusted me in that war, and I never did hold with chasing the tribes from their rightful lands in a cheating way. It put me and General Jackson on a permanent variance. And when I come home from the war, I got into politics. By then, Tennessee had become a state. Human beings come to edge out bears, so my neighbors asked me to run for Congress. I reckoned I had learned enough about stump speaking from the bears to go ahead and electioneer, so I did. But votes was precious scarce in the district, and I had to hunt them up every which where I could. So another time, I was riding a broadhorn down the Mississippi when I come across a fellow floating downstream in the stern of his keelboat, fast asleep with a jug twixt his legs. "Hello, stranger!" I hollered out a warning. "Wake up now, 'fore she runs away on you." He didn't stir a whisker. So as I floated past, I give him a jab with my steering oar. "Whoa," he said, a-comin' to life. "Who asked you to scratch my lice?" "You're a-headin' straight for snags," I informed him. "Shut up, for your teeth get sunburnt," he said, looking up all squinty-eyed. "I don't value you more'n a chaw plug tobaccy." "What?" said I, growing wolfy at his impudence. "Come ashore, then, and I shall give you a severe licking." He run his boat plumb foremost into shore. I followed on the broadhorn. Wouldn't you know that 8 more brawny fellows clumb out of his cabin and sprung to shore. "Who are these?" I asked. "Why, these here are my twin brothers," he said, "and we always fight as one." I had never seen such a mess of twins before, and it made me 8 times as wolfy. So we went straight to the licking. They was right smart varmints too, but I give them a frightful rough usage in reverse size order until they cried "Stop!" at each note of the scale. "You are a ripstaver," the oldest twin declared. "If I'd knowed your name, I'd vote for you in the election." "It's Crockett," said I, "and I am standing for Congress in this very district." "Why, then, me and my brothers shall cast as many ballots for you as they will allow," he said, and we all parted fast friends. Well, I was elected and served 3 terms in Washington, but I run head-on into my old adversary Andy Jackson, who had become president by then. We butted horns at every turn, on cheap lands for the western squatters, on breaking treaties we signed with the Cherokee. Politics was sad work. Finally, they spent $25 a vote to defeat me in the election. "Congress can go to perdition," I roared. "I'm a-going to Texas." Now, at the time, Texas was still owned by Mexico. Of course, for years, the Mexican government had invited Americans to settle up Texas so as to tame it for them. They said, "Here's 1,000 acres each, Senor Yankee Doodle. Come on down and be a part of this here country." And settle they did. It was a garden spot. I had great hopes of making my family's fortune there. By and by, the Americans said, "Why, there's enough of us here to start a government of our own. We'll call it the Republic of Texas." The Mexicans didn't like that. They fixed to run this rebellion into a gopher hole. That's how I come to be at the Alamo. The Alamo was an old Spanish church down in San Antonio de Bejar that the Mexicans used as a fort. Well, the Texans had come and pitched him out. The Mexicans didn't like that neither, and they sent a whole army to swap it back. The Texans cried out for help. I showed up with 12 Tennessee volunteers. None too soon. There was less than 200 of us in all. General Santa Anna had almost 7,000 troops camped close by on the Medina River. It was long odds. Our commander was the gallant Colonel William Travis. The enemy sent a message asking for his surrender, and he answered with a cannon shot. They kept us buttoned up in that old Alamo for 13 days, a hurling cannon shot at the walls night and day, but we did not lose a man. Before long, we defenders of the Alamo were living on nothing but pure hope. Trying to keep spirits up, I clumb right on top of the ramparts and flapped my arms and crowed like a rooster. "Cock-a-doodle-doo!" I hollered. I am half alligator, half horse, and half snapping turtle, with a touch of earthquake thrown in. I have got the closest shooting rifle, the ugliest coon dog, the roughest racking horse, and the prettiest wife in the state of Tennessee. I can whip my weight in wildcats, ride a streak of lightning through your crabapple patch, put a rifle ball between the horns of the moon, and outstare all the Frenchmen in New Orleans. I can run faster, squat lower, dive deeper, stay under longer, and come out drier than any man this side of the Big Muddy. A hush fell amongst them Mexicans out in the darkness. I can walk like an ox, run like a fox, howl like a wolf, hug like a bear, bite like a crocodile, swim like an eel, out-scream a panther, fight like a Chickasaw, beat the devil at cards, and don't mind being froze more than a rotten apple. Tired and hungry as they were, the men of the Alamo laughed and slapped their knees. I can grin a hurricane out of countenance, recite the Bible from Genesee to Christmas, blow the wind of liberty through a squash vine, tote a steamboat on my back, frighten the old folks, suck 40 rattlesnake eggs at one sitting, and swallow General Santa Anna whole without choking if you butter his head and pin his ears back. The boys on the ramparts give a yell of delight, but mostly they was less frightened. A good round of brag most always fortifies the heart. I'm an animal made of hard knocks, I kept a boasting. A horse that was never broke, a man of gumption with bark on. I don't wear a collar around my neck, nor plow no other man's furrow. I'm first rate and a half, and a little past common. I'll stand up to the rack, fodder or no fodder. I am the yellow blossom of the gum swamp. And I wish that I may be shot if I do not go ahead to the very last. I shall never surrender or retreat. Hooray for Crockett, the men cried. Hooray for Texas! To be truthful, I had gave that same speech in Congress many a time, but to less effect. It warmed my heart to see them boys buck up. Well, those Mexicans come at us starting before dawn on that 13th day, their trumpets blaring and their cannons a-roaring. Twice we beat 'em back, but finally they swarmed over the walls and put every last defender to the sword. But in the end, of course, Texas prevailed. We lost the battle, but we won the war. And that's how I become a legend. Where I am now, it's always springtime in the Smokies. And I have all day to roam and hunt and run with my dogs and politic with the varmints of the woods. At the end of the day, my pretty Polly is a-waiting in the cabin door with supper on the table and the youngsters round her skirts. And I am eternally happy to be who I am, which is Davy Crockett, the original ring-tailed roarer of the western woods, the yellow blossom of the gum swamp.
This has been Davy Crockett,